Harry's sandals sank into the wet muck of the beach as he gazed at the scene in front of him. It was almost funny. He'd always thought if he ever had a supernatural encounter in life, it would have happened in the dead of night. There was a truck parked on the beach, back to the sea, the door to the front cabin open, and nobody inside. Strange. He looked around the beach, and as far as he could see, he was the only person there for miles. What else could he expect, as the kind of freak who liked to take 6 a.m. walks and see the sunrise? Stranger than the abandoned truck was its contents. The back of the trailer was open, and it was full of old, soggy shoes, surrounded by other abandoned footwear scattered across the beach. Weird. Harry slid his own sandals off and tramped through the wet sand to get a closer look. He had no idea that the subtle decision he just made would be the thing that saved his life. Well, for a little while anyway. There was no rhyme or reason to the shoes. Boots, sandals, Converse sneakers. It was like the SS footlocker had exploded somewhere out at sea. All the shoes in the back of the truck were already soaked through, so it was safe to assume it hadn't accidentally dropped its cargo while backing up towards the shore. He'd heard stories like this, shipping crates full of international cargo falling off the boats and washing up on the shores of some distant country. They must have washed up on shore, somebody saw them, called the city to send down a truck to get it all cleaned out before the day truly began and the beachgoers descended. Harry could put all that together himself. But that's where the story came to a mysterious stop, didn't it? What happened to the driver? Why'd he only pick up half the shoes and then just leave his truck out here on the beach? His train of thought was interrupted by an incredible sight. A pair of vintage Air Jordans, tied together by the laces, sticking halfway out of the sand but otherwise looking pristine. He'd wanted a pair just like that when he was a kid, and they looked about his size. A hairdryer, a few hours on the radiator, and maybe they'd be salvageable. Perhaps, he thought as he reached for them, all this was meant to happen. Maybe it'd all work out for the best. Of course, Harry wasn't the only one wondering what happened to the truck driver on the beach, or where all those strange shoes had come from. A city councilwoman had gotten a call a few hours earlier from a concerned citizen roving across the beach at night with a metal detector. A citizen who found all these mysterious, washed-up shoes and didn't know what to make of them. There were hundreds, all scattered across the sand. The councilwoman made a call to a local contractor, who was given the simple instruction to head out to the beach, meet with the detectorist, and clean up the shoes. However, despite saying over the phone that he'd be happy to wait, the detectorist had already made tracks by the time the contractor arrived. People are so skittish these days, the councilwoman had thought, but when she called the contractor an hour later to check in on how the job was going, to her surprise, there was no answer. Had he flaked out on her too? She sighed and made another call to a competing company. "You just can't get the staff these days," she muttered. She had no comprehension that her little attempt to clean up the beach before morning truly began had already racked up a body count. Not that anyone would actually ever find those bodies where they were going. When he heard about the nature of the job, the second contractor turned up with a digger and piled the contents in, sand and all. He didn't feel like spending a few hours trudging through sludge like an idiot, individually picking up pairs of shoes to toss them in the back. No, this was much easier. And safer, not that he knew that second part. Doing it like this meant he was never really in direct contact with the shoes, and that was what saved his life. He took the cargo to the town hall, figuring he'd probably be told to take them to a dump and collect his payment, but he wanted to make sure he dotted every I and crossed every T. He'd left his competitor's truck out on the beach. The city council could hire a tow truck if they wanted to get rid of that. He wasn't in that industry. Morning was in full swing by the time he arrived at the town hall. The councilwoman had no idea why the contractor had bothered to even show her the stuff. She assumed he'd take them straight to the dump. But at the contractor's insistence, she took a look anyway. And, as expected, it was a big pile of waterlogged shoes and wet sand. She didn't think she needed to make any real statement on the matter. And then, she got the feeling. It was a strange, tingling sensation, as though she had something stuck in her own shoes, like grains of sand. An almost electrical pins and needles charge went through her skin, and as the contractor tried to talk billing, the councilwoman simply turned and started walking away. But not back towards City Hall. Down the street, in the direction of the beach, seemingly unmoved by the confused contractor yelling and swearing in her peripheral vision. She told him she was sorry, but there was something she needed to do. She didn't decide to walk, not really. Her legs had made that decision for her, and now they were carrying her step by careful step towards the beach. She didn't have a problem with it, it just felt like the right decision, like she was being called, summoned even. There was a specific place somewhere beyond the shoreline that she needed to be, and she would do whatever she could to get there. Soon, the sidewalk turned to sand under her feet. She saw the abandoned truck out on the beach and paid it no mind. She just kept walking until water lapped at her ankles. She never started swimming, just kept walking, getting deeper and deeper and deeper, until she saw strange shapes floating around her in the murk. The bodies of Harry, the detectorist, and the first contractor. You need to be careful when picking your footwear. Sometimes, if they don't feel quite comfortable on the first step, you'll break them in over time and end up making them comfortable. But other times, the shoes might break you in instead, especially if they happen to be infected with an anomalous footwear pathogen known as SCP-1667, also codenamed Shoe-In. An anomaly that transfigures your shoes into mind-controlling vectors of infection might seem a little silly at face value, but a seasoned anomalist should know at this point to never underestimate their opponent. If you do, you might just end up in a watery grave. Specifically, this anomaly is a kind of virus that spreads from item of footwear to item of footwear in close physical proximity. Anyone who comes into contact with one of these infected pieces of footwear will feel a strong urge to travel to a specific but mysterious point in the Pacific Ocean, which will often result in the person drowning. They will also attempt to remain in contact with the affected footwear, even when doing so is dangerous and inconvenient. And if you attempt to disrupt the path of these brainwashed travelers heading towards the ocean, they're liable to react violently, despite the fact that they may actually appear completely reasonable in conversation. None of these people bear any conscious awareness of where they're going or why, just an overwhelming sense that it must be done, like the migration instinct in birds. Studies are ongoing as to where the location these people are trying to reach is and what exactly is drawing them there. The anomaly was first discovered by the Foundation in the 1990s in a small coastal town in New Zealand that had experienced 17 missing persons reports. Several of these people were later found as dead bodies floating in the nearby ocean. A mobile task force was then sent to investigate after a field agent who'd first been assigned to the case disappeared and stopped responding to communications. Because the mobile task force weren't aware of the nature of the anomaly, several of their shoes soon became exposed and were infected by the anomalous pathogen. The result was a number of operatives becoming infected and beginning to wander towards the ocean. When the uninfected members of the team attempted to stop them, they wouldn't hear it. When the members tried to physically subdue the affected individuals, it quickly became a firefight, with gunshots exchanged and several dead. This was the first indication that this anomaly had serious potential to cause damage and loss of life if ever it reached a high-density population. Naturally, the SCP Foundation wanted to conduct extensive tests to discover the specific mechanisms that made this anomaly work, just how powerful it is, and of course, where they were all being driven to in their endless quest towards a specific point in the Pacific Ocean. And little did they know, what they'd find would be so much more unnerving than any of them could imagine. In the first test, a black combat boot was taken from the corpse of one of the drowned Mobile Task Force agents, presumably still infected despite its owner being deceased. It was placed next to a black business shoe owned by researcher Davis, held by a D-Class involved in the test, a 26-year-old Hispanic female. The purpose of this test was to prove the effective range of the anomaly in terms of its infectivity, and in this case, it proved to be far more virulent than the researchers even imagined. The black business shoe became infected after 8.41 seconds of exposure from 1.4 meters distance. Imagine how many people would be heading towards the ocean if an infected individual walked onto a city bus, or worse, a subway, or an airplane. Though, interestingly, it'd be unlikely that the pilot would fly the plane towards the ocean because infected individuals seemingly never choose to take vehicles in the direction of the ocean. They will always travel on foot. Though this could still result in a crash, plane or otherwise, if the pilot started walking towards the Pacific while in the cockpit. To give you an example of just how severe the behavior of infected individuals can become, they next conducted a test on the 26-year-old D-Class with the newly infected shoe. She held the shoe to her chest and immediately made a run for the door, yelling, "Move!" When researcher Davis attempted to stop her, she delivered a swift kick to his crotchal region and ran out of the door of the testing chamber while Davis doubled over in pain. The shoe still clutched to her chest like a newborn baby, The D-Class woman made a valiant stride through the halls of the building, chased by researchers and guards, all of which were desperately cautioned to avoid any direct contact. It was illustrative of the extrasensory navigational abilities that infections seem to bestow upon anyone touching an infected shoe. They have a psychic ability to know the exact direction they need to go at any given time in order to reach the specific point in the Pacific Ocean. The D-Class was apparently so resourceful under the influence of the pathogen that she managed to escape the outer perimeter of the base and was springing across the desert in the direction of the Pacific Ocean. A Foundation sniper posted on one of the guard towers managed to put her down with a shot to center mass, but damaged the newly infected shoe in the process. It was placed back into storage and the woman's body was incinerated. The Foundation was uncharacteristically hesitant to burn a bunch of human lives on testing the permutations of the pathogen, so they briefly moved on to animal tests, hoping to see whether the psychic effect would also work on other mammalian life. To this end, they brought in a 4-year-old Irish Terrier and placed her in contact with one of the shoes until the psychological influence took hold. And disturbingly, it did. The dog began running in the direction of the Pacific Ocean, but thankfully, due to a lack of opposable thumbs, it was easy to separate the terrier from the shoe and break the affliction without any lasting harm done. Dog lovers rejoice. But if it works on animals, what about other forms of life? To test this to its fullest extremes, researcher Davis and his team brought in a Virginia creeper plant and placed one of the infected shoes onto it. It felt almost like a joke that it was happening, but the results struck nothing but a deep fear into the hearts of everyone watching. Over the next couple of days, the plant literally grew in the direction of the Pacific Ocean. The presence of these shoes could cause literally all of nature to reorient itself to the Pacific Ocean under the influence of the anomaly, all because of some corrupted footwear. With all this in mind, it made researcher Davis and all the others extremely curious about one particular question. Where were all of these creatures headed? What was so special about this one strange spot on the Pacific Ocean? In order to find out, it made the most sense to affix one of these shoes to a creature that was already aquatic in order to track its path to the anomalous zone. That's why researcher Davis requisitioned a bottlenose dolphin and had one of the shoes attached to it before releasing it into the Pacific Ocean with a fixed GPS tracker. The dolphin traveled 3,500 kilometers to the southwest without a break, heading directly to the undefinable point where all these victims seemed to be heading. As it approached what the researchers believed to be the epicenter of the anomalous zone, the GPS cut out and the feed was lost. But the experiment was still considered a fruitful one. They now had the coordinates for exactly where the next experiment would need to take place. The black business shoes that were infected in an earlier testing phase were placed next to a pair of blue rubber diving flippers until the infection took hold, making them the perfect tool for the Foundation to reach the true heart of the matter. Another D-Class was requisitioned and given an atmospheric diving suit, or ADS, with waterproof video camera, GPS, and audio communicator attached, before having the infected flippers placed on his feet. He was then dropped at the last known coordinates where the Foundation lost the dolphin, and everything else was simply automatic. The D-Class continued heading southbound and down until his motions converted into an absolute dive, getting deeper and deeper by the second at considerable speed. Even as the pressure began to take its toll on the ADS, nothing seemed to deter the D-Class in his anomalous quest to the bottom, and he clearly had no fear of death. He just kept going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. Researcher Davis and his team heard the audio coming up live from the depths, despite the abyss being too deep and dark for the camera feeds to pick up anything legible. Even with advanced night vision capabilities and lights fixed to the ADS, the D-Class was muttering to himself in some stage of apparent delirium, but still showed no fear. And that's when they heard it. A distant wailing sound uncoiling in the dark. A shape, a sound signature, swirling in oblivion. Some huge aquatic entity down there in the depths of the ocean, presumably the entity that originated the anomalous pathogen. Though how and why it had chosen shoes for the vector of its infection was still very much a mystery. At a point, the oxygen levels in the ADS reached dangerous lows, and the D-Class is presently considered lost. As for what the thing deep below is, how it's infecting the shoes, or what its true intention is, we simply don't know. And we don't know how many other infected shoes are still out there, so you really should be careful the next time you find yourself perusing footwear, lest you get clobbered at the cobblers. Given the highly infectious and bizarre nature of this anomaly, equally strange American-specific containment procedures have been drawn up to limit the scope of its potential infection. Because of the naturally unpredictable nature of any anomalous disease, it's been given the containment class Euclid. Any shoes confirmed to be infected with the pathogen are to be stored in Containment Locker 16 at Storage Site 23 for further study and isolation from anything that happens to be wearing shoes. And that is really the key thing here. The infection needs to be kept away from any footwear that could be a potential vector for infection. There's an absolute embargo on shoes, boots, sandals, flip-flops, slippers, flippers, foot wraps, galoshes, moccasins, and even clogs being brought into the proximity of anomalous footwear instances. It really only takes one slip-up for things to get dangerous and cause a large-scale outbreak across a containment site. Socks are permitted, at least, because they don't appear to be vulnerable to the infection, which came as a huge relief to the people working in proximity of this anomaly who find the sight of feet revolting. This humble researcher included. Every 2 weeks, a shoeless member of Level 1 personnel is to open Locker 16 and reposition the shoes to face in a northwesterly position. This is necessary because the shoes themselves, in the absence of people to wear them, will still attempt to journey ambiently towards the Pacific Ocean, specifically at a rate of approximately 12.7 centimeters per week. In the event that this causes a containment breach, the procedure is simply to gather the shoes back up and place them in the locker with reinforced metal. A note appended to the containment procedures read, "It is suspected that SCP-1667 may not be fully contained. In the event of a suspected instance of containment breach, a barefoot mobile task force must be sent to investigate." It's a surreal thought, a Foundation mobile task force that could be held back by terrain with some sharp pebbles. Perhaps in the end, resistance to these anomalous forces is futile. Maybe we should embrace our natural urge to make a pilgrimage to the thing beneath the waves, because, after all, if the shoe fits, wear it. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-2450, Teeth.